We are born free, and we will die free. The time in between, though, that's complicated. In that time, governments, institutions, and our egos will limit our ability to find true freedom in this life. These are real stories of real people overcoming the odds, persevering in justice, and unlocking their potential. Welcome to Finding Freedom. Here's your host, John Oderman.
Hey, welcome into another episode of Finding Freedom here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. And this is the first here, I think maybe a second or a third, but haven't done it frequently. For today's episode, we are streaming live to a couple different platforms, streaming live to Twitter, Rumble, and YouTube. If this doesn't get banned or suppressed on YouTube, I'm sure it will. But if it does, of course, you can go find it on Rumble or on any podcast platform. Here at Lions of Liberty, we have 3 shows per week. Every Monday, we have my show, Finding Freedom. Every Wednesday, we have Brian McWilliams and Mean Age Daydream. And every Friday, we bring you a little bit of comedy and culture and a little bit of, light, fun show to send you into your weekend with Memores. You can check that out every Friday. And that is always broadcast live on Rumble as well. So please subscribe to the show. And if you really like what we do, we would appreciate you supporting us through Patreon or through Locals. You can find us on the platforms. I'm not going to give the URLs. You guys know how to search platforms and find things. Lions of Liberty, check us out. We have bonus content, lots of great stuff. My guest today, really excited about today's guest. She came out with a documentary which was released, I believe, in October. It's called Death Athletic. Jessica Solce, she's the director and producer, and she followed around and filmed an incredible story, one that you've probably heard about, probably you've read about. Cody Wilson, the creator and founder of Defense Distributed, and it's a exciting tale, and the film is incredibly well done. So I'm excited to talk with Jessica about that whole experience and also diving into, different aspects of it. So Jessica, welcome to Finding Freedom.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, cool to have you here. And, it's been, like 6 months since the film came out, right? Was it released in October? Did I get that right?
You got it right. October 25th.
So first question, like what's the reaction been? Have you been greeted with open arms by YouTube and all of the different platforms out there?
I mean, the platforms where you can, when you self-distribute, you can actually just hire an aggregator, and they will place you on platforms like Amazon and YouTube. And from the ones that I was trying to get on, I think there was only one, Vudu, that didn't accept the film. So I guess I got shut out of Vudu. But those are kind of like easy placements because that's what, the self-distribution system does that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I tried to sell this film in the past, first in 2019. And I was told by streaming platforms, we can't get behind this. It's on the wrong side of history. I tried to sell it again. It's not kind of quote unquote allowed in the mainstream right now, so no one will touch it. But the open arms has been everyone who has watched the film. It has been a really, really great response, even for individuals that normally would not gravitate towards this film. You think it's going to be about guns, but it's actually so much more. It's really about the First Amendment, and it really kind of catches people and throws them off in the sense of what they're expecting. And it's really about courage and creation and the ability of people to share what they make. So there's a lot more packed into this. It's not really just about 3D printed guns.
Right. Yeah. It's the focus is definitely so much on, our freedom of speech, our freedom to, freedom to access data at a fundamental level. And the opening scene. I don't want to give it away, but before we get into talking about the film itself, a little bit about yourself, if you could share how you got into how you got interested and passionate about making films.
Sure. I guess I've always loved the storytelling of filmmaking, specifically since I was young. That went through, acting process and all those kind of different mediums of filmmaking. But I actually studied film. I never thought I would make documentaries. I was in New York. I did acting, directing for stage, personal assistant work, grip and electric. I did all those things. And then in 2013, I was visiting family and I was told the story. Greg Boker, who is my first film called No Control, kind of like pulled me aside and was like, Jessica, I'm going to make art again. And this is what I'm making. And he was making an AR-15 pencil and paper that was going to be 20 feet by 7 feet tall. And this was post Sandy Hook. And I really thought it was going to be like a very beautiful way into a story that everyone was talking about, which was gun control, right? But at that moment in my life, I was just very much aware of how media was. Every time that came up, it was just kids running out of buildings. There wasn't really it was the first time that I was truly aware that there was no discussion happening. And when he told me about the piece he was making, it just occurred to me really quickly, wow, this would be a really beautiful way into the discussion. And then 5 days later, I was making a documentary. And that weekend, he introduced me on camera to, not introduced me to Cody, but the idea of Cody Wilson. Like, have I heard of Cody? And then I knew immediately that was going to be the yin yang of my first doc. So I started making that doc in 2013, and now I make documentaries. That came out in 2015. And I just wasn't done with Cody's story. There's lots and lots of people in my first documentary, No Control. And I just thought he was going to have such a big arc ahead of him, as well as no one was going to tell the story as a full picture, as a truthful picture. And I just kind of wanted to capture that.
So what year did you start filming for Death Athletic?
April of 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what's the genesis of the name Death Athletic? Because a little confusion around that.
Sure. There's a book called You Must Change Your Life by Peter Sloterdijk, who's a German philosopher. In making this film, I had to read a lot of philosophy to kind of talk to my characters, which was a great thing to do. I loved it. But if anyone knows Mr. Cody Wilson, he talks in philosophical terms quite often. Mm-hmm. And so at one point in 2015, not everyone, but a number of us was reading this book, You Must Change Your Life. And he has a section where he talks about death athletes. And in Peter Sloterdijk's terms, it's really about religious martyrs like Jesus, people that, overcome the tyranny of death, and they're emancipated by fulfilling their moral need, right? So that got tossed around. And about a year and a half ago, I realized that was going to be just a great title and slogan for what I feel like this film is about and what is happening in Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Aaron Schwartz, all these individuals that we currently know their names who do things despite their quote unquote possible death. Now, we're not talking maybe a real death. Prison is pretty close to it. Aaron Schwartz, unfortunately, is no longer with us. But we also have people who fight for what they believe in. They get their cultural death. They get canceled. They lose their family ties. There's so many other types of death now that people can go through for just standing up for what they believe. So Death Athletic came from there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, so at what point in time did you envision naming this film Death Athletic? Was it after Cody's arrest? Was it
Yeah,
something that yeah?
it was after. I had like a working title before that. That was kind of
Mhm.
way too long. And then so I renamed it. I think it was 2021 when I started calling it Death Athletic. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to get too much into, the film itself because I don't want to give a lot away, but if you can just talk a little bit about the storyline for people who aren't familiar with the story of Defense Distributed and Cody's battle with the government.
Sure. So what Cody Wilson is most known for still is the Liberator, which was the first almost fully 3D printed gun that he put the code on the internet. This caused an uproar. He received basically a cease and desist from the United States, a letter. And it took 2 years. After 2 years of receiving that letter in 2013, he had still not heard from the government, and Defense Distributed had still not heard from the government whether or not what they were doing was legal or not legal. And it was just kind of never responded to. So Cody, being Cody, decided that he would create a machine called the Ghost Gunner, which is a desktop CNC mill, which is the first time anyone made one that was desktop. And from the profits that he made on that, he decided to turn the tables and sue the United States government. So all of a sudden, it was Defense Distributed against the DOJ, and it was for the rights to publish the code for 3D printed guns online. Because what they're giving, and what many people still understand or know to this day, because they don't know the full story, they think Cody Wilson was giving people actual guns, like literal guns. But no, it was just code. And we can go back to the 90s with Bernstein and Zimmerman when they fighted for encryption code to be allowed to be given to the public. And during the Clinton administration, they decided, okay, we'll take it off the ITAR encryption and allow this tool to be allowed in public usage. So in 94 and 95, it was basically established that code was speech. Now, jump all those years forward, Cody is giving code. This code represents a gun, but this code is speech. So this whole lawsuit is really debating, is code speech, which was already established, and is code illegal if it represents or can future create a gun, but it's not an automated process. So it took a long time, and then finally, there's a lot of nooks and crannies, but in 2018, he won the case. But how he won is they got a license to publish many of the things they were originally fighting to publish. So he just got a license from the DOJ, and they moved certain munitions off of ITAR, which is a Cold War era regulations and restrictions, onto the EAR. Anyways, but when that happened, 21 attorney generals around the United States sued Cody and the DOJ on the same ticket. So basically, now they're being sued together as a pair, which is ironic, by 21 attorney generals around the United States. So this legal story, is basically, there's something always happening. Defense Distributed is always getting sued. They're fighting in the courts as much as possible. Ironically, at the same time, post 2018, lots of other individuals started jumping into the niche world, which is 3D printed guns, and actually starting to generate a lot of content. So the irony is the government is always and constantly going after Defense Distributed, when we can just go on the internet and find this in multiple places, find this code tucked everywhere and download. But they've never went after anyone else. He's truly just like he stands, he's the person to take down, if you will. So this film journeys through all of that. There's the legal process, but it's also the discussion of morality, of ethics, whether you agree with those ethics or morals, of courage. It's also, it's also about humility and decisions and ways things can go wrong. So there's a
Yeah.
lot in there. Yeah, that's the basic story.
Yeah, and I mean, by the way things unfolded, unfortunately unfolded with what happened with Cody and his arrest. It's very very humanizing. I mean, you're seeing Cody, this a fall in real life,
Mhm.
um, when he gets charged with meeting
Assault.
up with a girl who he met through, I think the site was called Sugar Daddy Meet or something like that,
Mhm.
which the site itself says it verifies, identification, age, but apparently this girl got around that somehow, and she was underage. I think 17 in the state of Texas, um, which is not legal for sexual contact, right?
She was
Um,
16.
oh, go ahead, correct me because I'm sure I
That's
messed
okay.
that up.
I mean, if you want, she was 16 and the
16.
legal age is 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, this is in the middle of you making this film, and I mean, you just referenced, 2018 was when a victory came through right around the same time frame, I
Yep.
think, when defense distributor actually got a license, in order to move forward, to some degree. So, from your perspective as a filmmaker, when you first found out about, you know, Cody's charges, Cody's arrest, can you just take us in your mind what was going through your head?
Oh, I mean, that's a very, very tough time.
Yeah.
It was not easy. I mean, I had never experienced knowing someone so closely and anything like this ever happening. So you can imagine every single question that runs through your head, ran through my head continuously on a loop for a long time. Um, the minute I caught word of it, I had known where Cody was visiting. I knew he was in Taiwan. I called him immediately, basically kind of demanding a response. And he told me the story. And from I'd known him for a long time at that point, and 5, 6 years, and I believed him. But you can't help questioning in a situation like that. You can't help constantly questioning because there's nobody has any facts. Nobody you're reading what the police are putting out, everything. But, I had known him for a long time, and oddly enough, I think if he had done exactly like, if he had sought out a minor specifically, I actually feel like he would have told me because that would have truly come out
Mhm.
very blatantly. So the hard part as a filmmaker during this part was really managing how to cover this without feeling like a vulture, to
Let
stay.
me let
Yeah.
me ask you a question. In that moment, did you ever consider scrapping the project, scrapping the film?
No, I didn't think, no, I never considered scrapping it. I knew that this was gonna be part of the
Right.
story. I mean,
Yeah.
if you rip the heart out, then you realize, "Oh, wow, this is an intriguing turn," like, that's
Mhm.
awful. But, no, I didn't think that, but there was moments when I was definitely working to realizing that I had to capture this, but there was moments where I was like, "Am I gonna be allowed?"
Mhm.
So, first in the courtroom, because I'm in the courtroom a lot, getting that, you could be in the courtroom sometimes, but, like, there was a lot of permissions to go through. Um, would Cody continue working with me was a question. Even though we were still talking, like, it happened in 2018, but I didn't get him back on camera until 2020, I believe.
Mhm.
So, it was definitely a process of waiting and trying, pushing to make sure I got what I needed for the film, but also like trying not to be completely awful person at the same time, because it's a hard time to be happening.
Right.
So, yeah.
So when something like that happens, when you're making a film and, it's, just life happening in the middle and your story has taken a stark turn.
Mhm.
At that point in time, do you start to think about and plan, like, which direction, is this film going? Is your vision changing for it? Or is it just you're just gathering and filming and you'll figure that out later?
I mean, I was definitely just gathering and filming at
Mhm.
the point. So we're working at 5, 6 years into filming at that point. And I had an idea. I was kind of wrapping up in some sense of what I thought after 5, 6 years. I was like, oh, okay, time to really start making this into a film. Um, but once this changed, I just knew that I couldn't stop filming. I couldn't just finish the film at this moment, because as a story that would be a ridiculous time to stop.
Right.
I knew that I definitely had to figure and go with what was happening. So it was just a lot of gathering. Of course, that did provide a certain kind of temperament to the film when we started editing and putting everything together. But
Right.
the entire goal was to be there as much as possible, but really just as simple as it is, really just capture it as it was happening and not put any kind of opinion or visual sway into what was happening. Like, definitely with this film, it's about Defense Distributed. It's about Cody Wilson. It's about people that work for Defense Distributed that never have been on film, like Benjamin Denio, who actually created the idea of the Liberator, the first wiki weapon. His great engineer, John Sullivan. You see a lot more people. And the whole point of how, when I try to make a film, is I don't want it about me. It's not about me. It's not about what I believe. I want the audience to be able to be immersed in something, and when they come out, they can make their own opinion.
Right.
So going into that whole criminal part of the story, it was the same thing. Get as much information as I can and try to remain as neutral as possible. So,
So when you came into um, this debate, and you start filming, and I say when you came into this debate, when you entered in creating, art that is going to be, used as a way to influence and persuade others.
mhm.
Did you come into it with political convictions one way or the other? If 3D printed guns were right or wrong, was that something that you had in mind ahead of time before you started filming?
In 2015, I definitely knew where I stood on all these topics.
Hmm.
In 2013, when I started my first film, 3D guns was a completely new thing. I mean, completely new to everyone. I knew where I stood on guns,
Yeah.
but 3D guns, I just started filming and figuring it out as I went. I had lots of questions. So yes, I've always kind of known where I've stood on all these things. Obviously, it's why I'm so curious about them as well, and how I could do a film for 8 years and keep going. But I mean, I do try to stay out of the film myself.
Hmm.
But yeah, I have strong opinions.
So to zero in on that, doing a film for 8 years from a just a process standpoint, from a day-to-day standpoint, um, how do you maintain your focus? How do you maintain, um, your vision, the big picture of it all as you're in that day-to-day slog for 8 years?
I mean, it was definitely really difficult a lot of the time, just because it took a lot of perseverance. There was definitely a smattering of moments through the years where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I cannot believe I'm taking so long. Like, I'm still following. And in this? Is this just an obsession, or I'm actually going to walk out of this with actual film? Like, of course, all those kind of fears or other voices are, chirping in my mind. But when I set out to do it, when I set out to do anything, I really like to do it. Like I like to finish what I started. So I just had to keep on going. And in that process, what that looked like was constantly staying in touch with Cody, staying in touch of the news, staying in touch of what everyone was talking about, the legal process, tapping in, being like, is anything happening? Do I need to fly? Where are we going? Because sometimes I'd find out about something 2 days beforehand because a legal issue would drop or something would happen. And that's when I would go to film. So it was kind of almost being like constantly ready to drop anything at any time and just go. But sometimes it would be months and months in between. So it was very like, it was a kind of a sustained readiness that was pretty intense for the most part, because you want to finish a project, you want to get something done, but you also know that this is the life cycle that's going to happen, and this film would not have been able to be made any other way.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, it takes a certain kind of person to be able to stay focused over that long period of time, and you definitely have what it takes to do that. So I want to ask you about a concept. I've had a couple different guests on here over the years who've talked about the idea of criticizing through creating. And, when I look at your film, Death Athletic, I think it is just a perfect example of criticizing through creating. In the current political system culture that we live in, so many people just want to complain or, talk about we need to, tear this down or end this in order to change the way that our politics function. But with a film like this, you've really, just through observing and creating art, have captured this moment in time that is always going to be there for people to look at. What happened during this 8-year period that is crucial in, how this country moves forward when looking at things like the First Amendment, and more specifically, obviously, how that translates into how 3D printing guns are regulated. So is that something that really drives the way you think? Like, are you actively looking at applying criticism through creativity, if that makes sense?
yeah, it does. I guess I'd never thought of it as criticism directly. It's more like showing the beauty of systems that people create that counter the negative things through building rather than complaining.
Yeah.
So there's lots of people that, probably me included, about some things. You can criticize, you can talk all you want, and it does definitely fuel it. But the people that are really interesting are the ones who are like, I've got an idea, and this will literally be an example of how to bust through that system. So yeah, the film. What attracted me to this story is definitely the utility of creating something the government has no idea how to handle. And this specifically is in the techno-political realm of creating things on the internet, which, the government is constantly trying to catch up with because it's such a vast and quick system of sharing things. We saw it with that AI bill, executive order, which is crazy interesting. I haven't read about it since, but basically, like, AI, it's the new thing. But with that bill, the government has basically said, you will give us a backdoor to everything that you will ever know, or you can't have an AI company, which is it's definitely, we can talk about how insane that is, how crazy, how horrible. But for the government, it's probably like their biggest chess move yet to play in the techno-political realm, because that means they just have all these companies working for them and they can aggregate all their data and just take it from there. Sorry, tangent.
No, No, that's scary, especially as, everything we do is now being captured as a data point. Literally everything, from not even online. If we're going shopping at, whatever, Walmart or grocery shopping, I mean, all of our purchases, everything is tracked and used for ads against us in order to pitch us. And, God knows what else the government is doing with that data.
Yes, I like criticism through making art.
Yeah.
So
So during this time, I mean, throughout the film, Cody is showing a lot of stress. Obviously, he's under a lot of stress as he has these lawsuits that are ongoing. I'm wondering if you yourself, as a creator, I guess two parts, if you felt sort of any of that stress secondhand, and or if through making this film, if the government knew that you were making it, was there anything that was done that you noticed in order to put obstacles in your way?
I never saw any kind of obstacles. I mean, if the government was truly watching him that closely, which I think they were, maybe they're not, you never know. I mean, in 2013, Cody was definitely like physically watched for a period of time. Um, I'm not sure if that continued. There's always, like little whispering, oh, maybe he's a Fed, maybe, within the community.
Of course, in the libertarian community, I think everyone's a Fed.
So yeah, exactly. So do they have my number? Probably. Did I ever experience anything? No. Nobody's ever, from what I can say at all, ever intervened in anything that I've done. Maybe they just knew, like everyone always teased me, Jessica, no one will ever touch this film. So they're like, hey, don't have to worry about that. Streaming platforms won't touch this film. She's on the wrong side of history.
You keep saying that keep saying that on the wrong side of history. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
I'm just saying that because that was literally the quote that somebody said to my PR guy in 2018, that my film was on the wrong side of history, which I feel like has always been used in reverse when like I've heard both camps kind of say this, but it was the first time where I like had heard it out loud. And it's like my film's on the wrong side of history because it's not like an anti-gun film. It's not like it's not for in this specific case. It's not like judging Cody and imposing, a unbiased opinion on what he's doing. It's really
because Cody's not the villain. You didn't make him the villain. Therefore,
yeah. I mean, some people could watch it and think that he makes himself though a villain. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's because it's a story, but I don't specifically integrate a narrative to push an idea. This is his story. This is Defense Distributed story. Everything that happens on their terms for the camera. I'm not pushing a story and I'm not trying to show a specific thing. And you can come out of the film liking him or hating him, or maybe still hating him, but true, which is more of a mind fuck, is hating him, but understanding why he's doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I would like to observe, a gun control advocate or a whole group of them watch this film, and maybe you've gotten feedback from them just to hear what their thoughts are and how they would counter, especially the free speech angle of, all that's being done is data is being exchanged.
Sure. I mean, I would love to as well. I know I had in New York at the premiere, I know there was a number of people in the audience that are very like pro gun control. And they love the film. It really took them to places that they were not expecting. It was only positive. Now, whether or not that goes back to the idea, you could still love this film, but dislike the main character. That's up to you. But there's so much more. You realize the First Amendment it's about courage and bravery and death athleticism and all these things. So I think it's far more. It's far more. It's a much bigger picture than what people expect when they just like see the name of who I'm covering and like, the image, because I do use that X-ray image of the Liberator gun. It's just so good. It's so powerful. Yeah. I think you had a first part to that question though, and I didn't get it.
I don't remember.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that happens. So I guess I have a couple open-ended type questions, which can be a little tricky, but I'm just curious, looking back at the past, not past 8 years, but the 8 years that you spent creating and filming for this, is there any part of the film that you're particularly proud of? Either a moment that you're like, oh man, I'm so glad I was there to capture that. It's so important. I was able to tie things together, or maybe a certain conversation that happened, or is there anything that jumps out to front of mind when I mention that?
I mean, I love every single scene in that film. There's actually so much that I filmed that didn't make it in. There's
Mhm.
more of like a reverse. There's so much
Mm.
content that didn't actually make it into the film. Um, oh goodness. I mean, that boat scene was very, very important, and I'm very happy that we got that.
Mhm.
The things that were really, really fun though. Everything, that first opening scene with the mapping of the gun, it was just so beautiful that when that happened, I was like, "Oh my god, that's the intro. We have an intro."
That
'Cause
is such a cool opening scene. Yeah,
yes,
that was
I
awesome.
mean, so oh goodness. I mean, getting Ben on camera and seeing their interaction was fantastic. Um, Oh, I kind of love a lot of it. And I just have so much on the floor that sometimes I'm watching and I'm like, oh, yeah, we cut that scene. I mean, you can't have a run on film at this level. Like, there's just too much information.
Yeah.
There's a montage at the end of the film of scenes that were completely basically cut. We filmed in West Texas, and I filmed kind of like the behind the scenes of when Cody was filming one of his last videos. And they were just so beautiful that like I had to figure out a way, even though I wasn't going to have all these scenes and it wasn't going to be its own section. I had to figure out a way of getting it in the film, just some of the
Mhm.
visuals, because they're just too beautiful to me. So we were able to like, I was like, okay, there's going to be like a minute and a half at the end of the film, and I'm gonna pull some voiceovers, and it's gonna be a little bit maybe random, or maybe it's gonna be like a breath before the end. But I had to do that's like I love some of the montages for sure.
Yeah.
Those were great. And I
Really
remember your
cool.
question.
What was it?
You asked me during the making of the film, did I feel like all the stress? What was
Oh,
the
yeah.
ride like?
Mhm.
Even though I was never a part of Defense Distributed, obviously, I felt so hyper connected to everything that was happening at all times. I definitely, you have this feeling of being in the mix, of being part of it, and everybody there, everyone that you see on camera was always so very accepting and lovely to me. And another reason why I could actually make the film is that I was
Mhm.
allowed into their lives in these moments. So yeah, even I felt all that stress, every single loss or win or thing that happened. It 100% felt like I was there with them, suffering or winning at the same time. Yeah.
So a second open-ended question here, which is kind of similar, but a little bit different. We've been talking for almost 40 minutes now. Is there any part of the film that you think is really important to talk about now to talk about during a podcast interview, in order to encourage someone to watch this film as like almost a teaser that would get people excited about going to watch it?
Um, this film I think is the most thorough primer of the 3D printed world from because it goes back a little bit 2013 to 2022, 23.
Mhm.
So if you really want to know how things went down, if you want to know even about Jay Stark and Terrence
Mm.
Dispense and why they started and why they kind of took the mantle and started running when Cody got into trouble, it's not there. It's in there. This is like a 3D printed gun primer movie. So much has happened since 2019, 2020. Other people started joining the community and building stuff. And there's been that's its own story. There's been so many like pivots and changes and breakups, I guess you could say. But most importantly, if you really care about freedom of speech, this is a movie about the First Amendment.
Yep.
And that is actually why it's the most important.
Yeah, 100% agree. This is, I mean, when you think 3D printed guns and you just hear that, people automatically think this is a Second Amendment issue, but no, this all comes back 100% to freedom of speech and the First Amendment, which I think is beautiful. I think that's really cool because, like we talked about earlier, with bringing in and addressing and trying to persuade or at least give people on the left a better understanding of this issue. I think it's I think it has a lot of potential to connect with that side. I'm curious, after 8 years of making this film, what is on the horizon for you? What is next?
Working it out right now, but I can say that I was just in El Salvador. And I was behind like filming Nayib Bukele during the election day. So that was very fun and curious. Not sure if that's just going to be edited into a short piece. But feeling the waters right now. What's happening in El Salvador is extremely interesting. Another person really being pretty death athletic, if you want to, he really has a strong sense of what he wants for the country. And he's going against, all the other Western countries that are calling him an authoritarian and a dictator. Well, 91% of the vote was 87. He was polling at 91% positivity, whatever, of, approval rate from the people.
Right.
And being in the city this weekend, I mean, he is loved.
That's got to be so interesting, being in America and seeing just how divisive everything is here, and then going to another country. I don't even know what that would be like.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I know someone that I was attempting to bring with me, and they asked me for kidnapping insurance. Like, it is so intense in the American media or the other media side, and what's happened in the past. Of course, it was the most dangerous country in the world. Yeah, I'd be scared too. But then when you start reading things like, oh, it's actually less dangerous than United States now, like, where does it land? I understand that. I had visited one time before, so I also understood that it's not dangerous anymore. It's a weird thing to see how the media again is representing a historical moment to their people and their audience, and then going to El Salvador. And I mean, everyone is fantastically nice, lovely, happy. And it's almost in this like childish newness, naivete of like, wow, we can be outside at night. They have a center of the city where, a couple years before, no one was ever there. You just didn't go out.
It's interesting. It's almost like, I would imagine, a comparison would be like being in prison and getting released.
Well, yeah, freedom is safety. And if you don't have safety, then you are in prison. And that's basically, that's exactly it. Bukele has allowed people to finally enjoy life beyond an extreme level of fear. And even we spoke to people that didn't want to vote for him, but they could not deny that their life had been completely changed. their dissent was that, or their feelings or their frustrations was he hasn't done enough yet. He hasn't changed the education system yet. It's still in poverty and crisis.
Yeah.
But like how far can you go? It's been 5 years. I feel like that's a pretty decent change. Now we can watch this future and see if he continues this and he's doing the things he promises and he can turn the rest around. But like, it's a pretty good score considering where El Salvador has come from already. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. And to be perfectly honest, I really have not been following at all when I first started reading about it with this last election. So, yeah, that's something that I for one, if you do end up making a some sort of film about that, I would be very interested in watching it. But
Thank you.
very cool. So, where can people find Death Athletic? Where can they watch it?
Sure. Website deathathletic.com. You can go buy it with BTC, with Bitcoin or fiat. You can buy it directly. It's also on other platforms, so Amazon, iTunes, all those links are at deathathletic.com. I am trying to be, a Twitter person now and keeping everyone up to date. So Jessica Solce on Twitter. And I hope that there's, it seems like this year there's going to be more theatrical screenings and things like that. So if anybody wants to like keep up to what's happening, if I'm doing something on El Salvador or drop anything, Twitter is going to be where it happens. Cool. And first 50 people, if you buy the film, use the code VIRTUE. It'll only happen or work via the link at Death Athletic to VHX, and you can use Virtue and you can get a discount. So
awesome.
Thank you.
So I think you mentioned when it came out in October that you had a couple live viewings. Is that right?
We had a premiere in New York, and then we had a premiere in Austin.
How difficult was that to coordinate and all of that?
I mean, I organized it, so it was pretty easy. I like my control there, John. Yeah. How difficult it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't difficult. The theater was fine with it. AFS in Austin, they were fine with it. Got packed houses. It was great. I also went to Paralelní Poli in the Czech Republic, which is a hackers congress. That's very, very cool. And that was really talking to the audience, right? That was the crowd that really, really loved this film. Yeah, so those screenings happened, and they were really. I mean, for me, it was really intense and fun.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea. I mean, and what prompted that question is I had a guest on a few weeks ago, Chris Spangle. And one thing that he is looking at doing, he lives in Indianapolis, is bringing building local community through podcasts, like having live podcasts or just gatherings of people who listen to the same podcast together in order to meet in person. And it's so cool with a film like this, where you can bring in a group of people together to watch it. People can make connections and you can start to build that local community rather than just having, a bunch of people that you kind of know online, but haven't met in person. But, I think it's a cool way to sort of build a community with like-minded people. So, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Well, that's all I have, Jessica. Thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And we'll just do one more time. Plug the website and your Twitter.
deathathletic.com and Jessica Solce, which is SOLCE, is my Twitter handle. This is fun. Thank you for having me. Thank you for talking about the film.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show, Jessica. Appreciate it.
Ciao. Bye.
Okay. Bye. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that interview with Jessica Solce, and hopefully you enjoyed this live stream if you watched it. If this is something that you like going forward, if you want to watch on Twitter or Rumble or YouTube or Facebook, I'll do that to our Facebook page next time. I don't even know if anyone sees our Facebook page, but if you do, then I guess you'll find out next time I live stream. But thank you for listening. As I said at the top, if you like what we do, please hit that little follow button. If you're on Apple Podcasts. It's up in the corner. You can barely see it now. They've made it so hard to find. Follow us on Spotify or whatever your favorite podcasting platform is. We now have video available on Spotify if you are watching the Finding Freedom feed. So not the Lions of Liberty Network feed, but the Finding Freedom feed. For some reason, the Lions of Liberty feed, they won't allow us to broadcast video. Not exactly sure why, but we'll try to get that figured out. And, like with Spotify, you can also find just my show, Finding Freedom, on any podcasting platform if you don't want the whole channel. Or you can subscribe to both. That's the preference, of course. But thank you, everyone, for listening and tuning in. And I will see you all next week. In the meantime, always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.